came into my house. Now it's my game.
The garbage truck rumbled to a stop outside my house at exactly 6:47 a.m., same as every Tuesday for the past 3 months. But this morning, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Frank Mallory, our new garbage man, kept glancing toward our bedroom window. Or maybe it was the fact that my wife Carla had been whispering into her phone until 2 in the morning again. I'm Greg Norris, 43 years old, maintenance engineer at the municipal water treatment plant. Not exactly the kind of job that gets you invited to cocktail parties, but it pays the bills and keeps the lights on in our modest 2-story house on Maple Street. Carla always said I was too practical for my own good. These days, I'm starting to think that's not such a bad thing. Morning, Frank, I called out, wheeling our trash bin to the curb. The big man looked up from loading Mrs. Krantz's recyclables into his truck. Frank was built like a linebacker gone to seed, with graying hair and hands that looked like they'd seen more than their share of hard work. Mr. Norris. He nodded, but his eyes kept darting toward the house. Mind if I ask you something? Go ahead. Frank wiped his hands on his coveralls and stepped closer, close enough that I could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. You need to leave this house before it happens. Tonight. I laughed. Had to. Before what happens? Instead of answering, Frank lifted the hem of his work shirt. Tattooed across his ribs was an elaborate design, a coiled snake wrapped around a dagger with the words, "Loyalty in, loyalty out," scripted below. Prison ink, no question about it. Don't tell your wife, he said quietly. Tonight. The truck's hydraulics hissed as Frank dumped our trash and moved on to the next house. I stood there holding the empty bin, trying to process what had just happened. A convicted felon was giving me cryptic warnings about my own home. And the weird part? The tattoo design looked familiar. I'd seen something similar recently, but couldn't place where. Back inside, Carla was already dressed for work in her sharp black suit and heels. She worked as a creative director at Pinnacle Advertising downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of modern art that looked like someone had sneezed on a canvas. At 38, she was still stunning, with auburn hair and green eyes that could freeze you solid when she was angry. You're up early, she said, not looking up from her phone. Garbage day, you know how it is? She scrolled through whatever had her attention. I'll be late again tonight. Big presentation tomorrow. Another one? That's the third this week. Now she looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Annoyance? Guilt. It's called having ambition, Greg. You should try it sometime. The comment stung, but I let it slide. Carla had been throwing little barbs like that for months now. Ever since she'd started her fitness routine and bought all that new lingerie I never got to see her wear, these days she treated me like furniture, useful to have around, but nothing you'd actually notice. After she left, I found myself thinking about Frank's warning. The guy was clearly ex-con, but there had been something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition, like he knew something I didn't. I was still thinking about it when I got to work. The treatment plant was a maze of pipes and tanks, and the constant hum of machinery. My office was a glorified closet with a view of the settling ponds, but it was mine. Jared Murphy, my assistant and the closest thing I had to a friend these days, stuck his head in around 10. You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes, he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Jared was 28, built like a scarecrow, and had the kind of optimism that came from not being married yet. Just tired. Carla's been working late a lot. Ah, Jared nodded knowingly. The old working late routine. My brother's ex-wife pulled that one too. It's not like that. Sure it's not. That's why you look like you've been chewing glass. I wanted to tell him about Frank's warning, but it sounded crazy even in my head. Instead, I focused on the day's work orders. We had a pump failure in Sector 7 and a valve replacement that was already 3 weeks overdue. Normal problems with normal solutions. The kind I was good at. It was after 6 when I finally made it to the Dropout, the neighborhood bar where I'd been stopping more and more often lately. The place was exactly what it sounded like. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of clientele that included retired factory workers and divorced guys like me who weren't quite divorced yet. Darla, the owner-bartender, was a woman in her 50s who'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. She poured my usual bourbon, neat without being asked. You look troubled, honey, she said, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. Frank Mallory? I said. The garbage man. You know anything about him? Darla's hands stilled for just a moment. Frank? Sure, I know Frank. Why? He said something strange this morning. Something about me needing to leave my house. Frank did time upstate. Armed robbery, I think. But he's been clean since he got out. Works hard, keeps to himself. She leaned closer. But he's got good instincts about people. If Frank told you to leave, I'd listen. That's insane. Leave because the garbage man has a feeling? Honey, I've been tending bar for 23 years. You learn to read people. And right now you're reading like a man who already knows he's in trouble but doesn't want to admit it. I finished my drink and headed home, Darla's words echoing in my head. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Carla's car wasn't there, which wasn't unusual anymore. Another late night at the office. I was fumbling for my keys when I noticed something on the hood of my truck. Small, metallic, painted olive green. A toy hand grenade, the kind kids played army with. But this one had been modified. The pin was real, and there was a note tied to it with fishing line. Next time it won't be a toy. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the front door. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. Like someone had been careful not to disturb anything. I checked the security system Carla had insisted we install last year. It showed no unauthorized entries, but the timestamp indicated it had been disarmed for 3 hours that afternoon. I was still staring at the display when Carla's headlights swept across the living room window. She came in looking perfectly composed, not a hair out of place. "You're home early," she said, setting down her purse. "Found this on my truck." I held up the grenade. She barely glanced at it. "Probably some kids playing pranks. You know how they are in this neighborhood. Kids don't usually leave death threats, Carla." "Death threats?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Greg, you're being paranoid. It's a toy." "Yeah, and I'm the tooth fairy." I turned the grenade over in my hands. "Someone was in our house today. The security system was turned off. I came home for lunch, must have forgotten to reset it." "You never come home for lunch." "Well, I did today." Her voice had that edge it got when she was done with a conversation. "I'm going to shower. Try not to see conspiracies and everything while I'm gone." As she headed upstairs, I caught a glimpse of something on her left hand. A small tattoo, fresh enough that the skin was still slightly red, a snake wrapped around a dagger, just like Frank's. I sat in the dark living room for a long time after that, turning the toy grenade over and over in my hands. Frank's warning kept echoing. "You need to leave this house before it happens." The question was, before what happens? I was about to find out. The next morning, Frank wasn't on the garbage truck. A different guy, younger, with nervous eyes, collected our trash without making eye contact. When I asked where Frank was, he just shrugged and said something about a route change. I spent the day at work trying to focus on a water main replacement project, but my mind kept wandering. The tattoo on Carla's hand, the toy grenade. Frank's warning. Pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite see the shape of yet. Jared noticed my distraction during our afternoon safety meeting. "You're somewhere else today, boss. Everything okay at home?" "Define okay." Yikes. That bad? I almost told him everything then. About Frank, about the tattoo, about the growing certainty that my wife was involved in something I didn't understand, but it sounded crazy, even to me. "Just the usual married couple stuff," I said instead. After work, I decided to skip the dropout and head straight home. Maybe I could catch Carla before she left for another late night at the office. Maybe we could actually talk like we used to, back when she still looked at me like I was more than just an inconvenience. The sun was setting as I pulled into the parking lot of the grocery store near our house. I needed milk, bread, the basics. Normal things for a normal evening. I was walking back to my truck, paper bag in hand, when I noticed the white van parked 3 spaces over. 2 men sat in the front seats, both wearing baseball caps pulled low. Something about them made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way they'd positioned the van to block my truck. Maybe it was the fact that neither of them was looking at me, but I could feel their attention like heat from a fire. I was fishing for my keys when they moved. The first one was out of the van before I could react, crossing the distance between us in quick, silent strides. He was average height, but built solid, with the kind of muscles that came from actual work, not a gym. His partner flanked me from the left, cutting off my escape route. "Greg Norris?" the first one asked. His voice was calm, professional. "Depends who's asking." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Someone who thinks you should mind your own business." The punch caught me in the solar plexus, doubling me over. The grocery bag exploded against the asphalt, milk carton splitting and spreading in a white puddle. Before I could straighten up, hands grabbed my arms and dragged me between 2 parked cars. "This is about your wife's business," the second man said. He had a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. "Stay away from it. I don't know what you're talking about." The first punch broke my nose. I felt the cartilage crunch and tasted iron. The second caught me in the ribs, and I heard something crack. "Carla's got friends," Scarface said. "Friends who don't like nosy husbands." They worked me over for maybe 2 minutes, but it felt like hours. Professional job. Nothing that would show unless I took my shirt off. Nothing that would put me in the hospital. Just enough to make their point. "Next time we won't be so gentle," the first man said as they walked away. "Stay away from Carla's business, or we'll come back and finish this." I lay there in the parking lot for I don't know how long, with a metallic taste in my mouth and trying to breathe around what felt like a broken rib. A woman walking to her car found me and called emergency. The paramedics wanted to take me to the hospital, but I convinced them I was okay. "Just a mugging gone wrong," I told them. "Random crime." The police took a report, but I could see in their eyes they didn't expect to catch anyone. 2 guys in a white van? Could be anybody. Happens all the time. It was almost 10 when I finally made it home. Carla's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. She was in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Jesus, Greg, what happened to your face?" "Got mugged, grocery store parking lot." She rushed over, all concern and gentle touches. For a moment, she was the woman I'd married, the one who used to patch up my cuts and bruises from weekend home improvement projects. "Did you call the police? Go to the hospital?" "Police, yes. Hospital, no, I'm fine." "You're not fine. Look at you." She touched my swollen nose gingerly. "We should get you checked out." I said I'm fine, Carla. Something in my voice made her step back. "Okay, if you're sure." I watched her pour herself more wine, noting the slight tremor in her hands. "Funny thing," I said. "The guys who did this, they mentioned you." The wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. "What?" "Said I should stay away from your business. Any idea what that might mean?" "No," but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Probably just random crazy talk. You know how criminals are." "Yeah, random." I touched my nose and winced. "I'm going to bed." "Greg, wait." She caught my arm. "Maybe we should talk, really talk, about us, about everything." For a second, I almost believed her, almost thought we could work through whatever this was. Then I saw the tattoo on her hand again, fresh and red and identical to Frank's prison ink. "Tomorrow," I said. "I'm too tired tonight." I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door, something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. Through the window, I could see the street where Frank's garbage truck should have been parked, getting ready for the next day's route. But the street was empty. I lay awake most of the night, listening to Carla move around downstairs. Around 2 a.m., I heard her talking on the phone, voice too low to make out words. But the tone was urgent, almost desperate. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about snakes and daggers and men with scarred faces. And somewhere in the dream, Frank Mallory was shaking his head sadly, saying, "I told you to leave. Now it's too late." I woke up knowing he was right. The next morning, Carla was gone before I got up. No note, no goodbye, just the lingering smell of her perfume and an empty coffee cup in the sink. My face looked like I'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight, all purple bruises and swollen features. I called in sick to work, which raised eyebrows since I hadn't taken a sick day in 3 years. Jared wanted to come over and check on me, but I told him I just needed rest. What I really needed was answers. Carla worked at Pinnacle Advertising on 5th Street, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never heard of comfort. I'd been there exactly twice in the 5 years she'd worked there, once for a Christmas party and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. I parked across the street at 11 a.m. and waited. From my truck, I had a clear view of the building's main entrance and the parking garage where Carla kept her BMW. If she was really working all those late nights, she'd be in the office. If not, well, at least I'd know. At 11:47, Carla walked out of the building, but she wasn't alone. The man with her was about my age, maybe a little younger, with the kind of build that came from expensive personal trainers and carefully managed diets. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. They walked close together, not quite touching, but intimate in the way of people who knew each other well. Very well. I followed them 6 blocks to Marcello's, an upscale Italian place where the lunch menu started at $30. They took a table by the window, and I watched from my truck as they talked. Carla was animated, gesturing with her hands, laughing at his jokes. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. When they finished lunch, the man walked her back to her building. At the entrance, he kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a real kiss. The kind married people were supposed to give each other. I sat there for a long time after they disappeared inside, trying to process what I'd seen. 15 years of marriage, and she was kissing another man on a public street like it was the most natural thing in the world. The anger came slowly, building like pressure in a boiler. Not just at the affair, though that was bad enough, but at the lies, the late nights, the way she'd been treating me like an inconvenience. How long had this been going on? How many times had she come home from being with him and climbed into bed next to me? I was still sitting there when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Norris, this is Frank Mallory. Frank, where are you? You weren't on the route yesterday. Had to switch routes. Safer that way. His voice was tense. We need to talk, tonight. You know the old Sinclair station on Route 9? The abandoned one? 9 o'clock. Come alone and don't tell your wife. The line went dead. I spent the rest of the day trying to make sense of everything. The affair was clear enough. Carla was cheating with Mr. Expensive Suit. But how did that connect to Frank's warning? The beating in the parking lot, the matching tattoos. At 8:30, I drove out to Route 9. The old Sinclair station had been closed for years, a relic from when gas was under $1 and full service meant something. Frank's pickup truck was parked behind the building, hidden from the road. He was waiting for me by the old service bay, smoking a cigarette. Up close, he looked older than I'd thought, with the kind of weathered face that came from hard living. You look like heck, he said. Feel worse. What's this about, Frank? He dropped the cigarette and ground it under his heel. Your wife's in deep with some bad people. Worse than you know. How do you know about my wife? Because I used to run with the same crew, Viper D'Amato's organization. He lifted his shirt again, showing the snake and dagger tattoo. This isn't just ink, Mr. Norris. It's a brand. Means you belong to Viper, body and soul. Viper? Vincent D'Amato. They call him Viper because once he gets his hooks in you, you're dead if you try to leave. Frank's eyes were haunted. I did 8 years upstate because I wouldn't rat him out. Figured that was the end of it. Then I started collecting garbage in your neighborhood and saw your wife with the same mark. The pieces were starting to fit together. The man she was with today, expensive suit, looks like a banker. That's him, Viper D'Amato. And if your wife's got his mark, she's in his crew now. Which means she's planning something and you're in the way. What kind of something? Frank lit another cigarette with shaking hands. Insurance scam, maybe. Or she's got debts to pay off. Either way, the usual solution is a convenient accident for the husband. The toy grenade, the beating, the warnings to stay away from Carla's business. It all made horrible sense. Why are you telling me this? Because I got a daughter your age, Frank said quietly. And because nobody deserves to die for being stupid enough to trust the wrong person. We talked for another 20 minutes. Frank told me about Viper's operation. Loan sharking, protection rackets, insurance fraud, small-time organized crime with big-time violence for anyone who got in the way. He told me about the tattoo ritual, how new members had to prove their loyalty through a binding ritual. Your wife's got the mark, but it's fresh, he said. Means she's new to the crew, probably desperate for money or in trouble some other way. What should I do? Get out, tonight, pack a bag and disappear until this blows over. I can't just run away. You can't fight Viper D'Amato either. Man's got connections all over the city. Police, judges, city council. You're just a maintenance engineer. Yeah, I said, anger building in my chest. Just a maintenance engineer. Frank must have heard something in my voice because he stepped back. Don't do anything stupid, Mr. Norris. These people will end you. Maybe, but I'm not running. I drove home slowly, thinking about everything Frank had told me. Carla's car was in the driveway and lights were on in the kitchen. Normal suburban evening, if you didn't know about the snakes and daggers hiding underneath. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop, working on what looked like advertising layouts. She looked up when I came in, and I saw concern flicker across her face. Your nose looks better, she said. Less swollen. Yeah, I heal fast. Greg, about last night, about what those men said. I've been thinking. About what, Carla? She closed the laptop. Maybe we should go away for a while. Take a vacation. Get out of town until things cool down. Things? Whatever's going on. The mugging, the threats. Maybe it's connected to your work somehow. Disgruntled contractor or something. I sat down across from her, studying her face. She was good. I had to give her that. The concern looked genuine, the worry real. If I hadn't seen her kissing Viper D'Amato, if Frank hadn't told me about the tattoos, I might have believed her. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I saw you today, downtown having lunch with a friend." Something flickered in her eyes. "Oh?" "Nice-looking guy, expensive suit, seemed very friendly." "That was just a client meeting." "Do you kiss all your clients like that?" The mask slipped then, just for a second. I saw calculation behind her eyes, the quick mental scramble of someone whose lie had just been exposed. "Greg, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, but I'm tired of explanations." I stood up. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Wait," she caught my arm. "Please. Let me explain about Vincent." Vincent. She'd used his real name without thinking. Confirmation, if I'd needed any. "Tomorrow, Carla. I need time to think." I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door again. Through the thin walls, I could hear her on the phone, voice urgent and worried. Probably calling Vincent, telling him the husband was getting suspicious. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Frank's advice to run. It was the smart play, the safe play. Pack a bag and disappear until Viper got tired of waiting and moved on to easier prey. But I'd never been much for running away. And 15 years of marriage, even a bad marriage, deserved better than just slinking off into the night. If Carla and her boyfriend wanted me gone, they were going to have to work for it. I woke up Thursday morning with a plan. Not a good plan, maybe, but a plan nonetheless. If Viper D'Amato's crew wanted to play games with my life, I was going to show them that maintenance engineers knew a thing or two about creative problem solving. Carla was already gone when I got up, which was becoming the new normal. I called in sick again, claiming food poisoning this time. Jared sounded skeptical, but he covered for me without asking too many questions. I spent the morning at the hardware store and the electronics shop buying supplies, extension cords, electrical timers, motion sensors, a few other items that would have looked innocent to anyone who didn't know what I was planning. The beauty of working with municipal water systems for 20 years was that you learned how all kinds of mechanical and electrical systems worked, and more importantly, how to make them fail at exactly the right moment. By noon, I had everything set up in the basement. To a casual observer, it would look like I was doing routine maintenance on the water heater and electrical panel. But I'd rigged a few surprises for anyone who came downstairs uninvited. The motion sensor was hidden behind the furnace, wired to a timer that would cut power to the basement lights after a 30-second delay. The extension cords were arranged to look messy and accidental, but they formed a careful maze that would funnel intruders toward the far corner where I'd set up my piece de resistance. The old workbench down there had a vise that could exert about 2,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. I'd rigged it with a remote control so I could operate it from across the room. Anyone who got too close to investigate would find their hand or arm caught in a grip that could crush bone. It was crude, but it would work, and it would send a message that Greg Norris wasn't as helpless as he looked. I was putting the finishing touches on my setup when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the basement window, I could see Carla's BMW. But she wasn't alone. A black Escalade was parked behind her and 3 men were getting out. Viper D'Amato looked even more expensive up close. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes probably cost more than my truck, and he moved with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. The 2 men with him were clearly muscle thick-necked, dead-eyed, wearing the kind of cheap suits that couldn't quite hide the shoulder holsters underneath. I could hear them talking in the kitchen above me. Voices muffled by the floor, but the tone clear enough. Carla sounded nervous. Viper sounded annoyed. The muscle didn't say much, but I could hear them moving around, probably checking the house. "Greg," Carla called down the stairs, "can you come up here? There's someone I want you to meet." "Be right there," I called back, palming the remote control for the vise. I found them in the living room. Carla was perched on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Viper was standing by the fireplace, examining our wedding photos with the kind of detached interest you'd show a museum display. His 2 associates flanked the doorway, blocking any escape route. "Mr. Norris," Viper said without turning around, "I've heard so much about you. Wish I could say the same." Now he turned, and I got my first good look at Vincent Viper D'Amato up close. He was handsome in the way of men who spent serious money on their appearance. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect tan. But his eyes were cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator sizing up prey. "Your wife tells me you've been asking questions," he said, "poking around in things that don't concern you." "My wife's business concerns me plenty." Does it? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because from where I sit, your wife's business is keeping her happy. And lately, that's been my job. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't even trying to hide the affair, wasn't bothering with denials or explanations, just laying it out there like a fact of nature. Greg, Carla said quietly, Vincent and I, we need to talk to you about some things. What things? Viper walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of Carla and me from our honeymoon in Hawaii. We looked so young, so happy, like we actually loved each other. Your wife owes me money, he said, still studying the photo. Quite a bit of money, actually. Gambling debts, mostly. Some other expenses. How much? $200,000, give or take. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $200,000. More than 4 years of my salary. More than the house was worth. I don't have that kind of money. No, but you have life insurance. $500,000, according to Carla. Enough to pay off her debts and leave a nice little nest egg for her new life. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The late nights, the affair, the fresh tattoo, the warnings to stay away from Carla's business. They weren't planning to rob me or hurt me. They were planning to end me. The thing is, Viper continued, accidents can be tricky to arrange. Much easier if the husband cooperates. Takes a nice long walk off a tall bridge, something like that. Clean, simple, no messy investigations. And if I don't cooperate? One of the muscle-bound associates stepped forward. I recognized him now, the man with the scar who'd beaten me in the parking lot. Then accidents become messier, Viper said. Home invasions gone wrong, workplace accidents, random violence. The insurance still pays out, but there's more risk involved. I looked at Carla, sitting there with her hands folded, not meeting my eyes. 15 years, I said. 15 years of marriage, and this is how it ends. I'm sorry, Greg. I really am. But I'm in too deep to back out now. How deep? How long have you been planning this? 6 months, she said quietly. Since I started working with Vincent's consulting business. Consulting business? Viper smiled. I provide various services to businesses around the city. Protection, problem solving, creative financing. Your wife needed help with some gambling debts, and one thing led to another. And the tattoo? The snake and dagger? Insurance, Viper said. Once you wear my mark, you're committed. No backing out, no changing your mind, blood in, blood out. The same words Frank had tattooed on his ribs. I was starting to understand why he'd been so frightened. So what happens now? I asked. Now we go downstairs and have a more private conversation, Viper said. Away from the windows, away from the neighbors, somewhere we can speak freely about your options. The basement. They wanted to take me to the basement, where I'd spent the morning setting up my surprise party. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but something must have shown in my face because Viper's eyes narrowed. Problem, Mr. Norris? No problem. Lead the way. We trooped downstairs, Viper first, then me, then the 2 associates. Carla stayed upstairs, probably not wanting to watch whatever they had planned. The basement looked exactly as I'd left it. Cluttered, messy, like a man who wasn't very good at organizing his workspace. The motion sensor would have already detected us, starting the 30-second countdown to lights out. Nice setup you have down here, Viper said, looking around at my workbench and tools. Very practical. I like to tinker, so I see. He walked over to examine the vise, running his fingers along the metal jaws. Impressive piece of equipment. Bet this could crack a walnut. Or a skull, Scarface added helpfully. 20 seconds left on the timer. I needed to get them positioned just right. The thing is, Mr. Norris, Viper continued, I don't think you fully appreciate the situation you're in. Maybe a demonstration would help. He nodded to Scarface, who grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward the workbench. Perfect. Exactly where I wanted them. 10 seconds. You see this vise? Viper said, cranking the handle to show how it worked. Amazing how much pressure these things can generate. Bet if we put your hand in here... 5 seconds. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately. Battery-powered LED strips I'd installed along the baseboards. They provided just enough illumination to see shapes and shadows, but not enough for clear vision. In the sudden darkness, I heard Viper curse and his associates fumble for their tools. I dove to the left, rolling behind a stack of paint cans as a thunderous bang erupted. The bullet sparked off the concrete wall where I'd been standing. In the confined space, the sound was deafening. Find him! Viper shouted. I had the advantage now. I knew every inch of this basement, had planned for this exact scenario. They were stumbling around in unfamiliar territory, trying to navigate by the faint glow of the emergency lights. Scarface made the mistake of following the extension cord maze I'd laid out. I heard him trip and go down hard, his tools skittering across the concrete floor. While he was scrambling to find it, I triggered the vise. The remote control worked perfectly. The metal jaws snapped shut with a sharp clang, missing Scarface's groping hand by inches, but the sound and the sudden movement were enough to make him panic. He rolled away from the workbench, directly into the path of the second associate. They collided in a tangle of arms and legs, both men cursing in the darkness. I used the distraction to circle around behind them, staying low, moving by feel and memory. "Enough!" Viper's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Norris, I'm impressed, very clever, but this doesn't change anything. You're still outnumbered, and you're still going to die tonight." "Maybe," I called back from my hiding spot behind the water heater, "but it won't be as easy as you thought." "No, it won't, which means it's going to be a lot more painful for you." I heard him moving, trying to triangulate my position from my voice, but I was already on the move again, working my way toward the stairs. If I could get upstairs, maybe I could... The emergency lights chose that moment to die. Battery failure. I'd been so focused on the dramatic effect of cutting the main power that I'd forgotten to check the backup system. Now we were all in complete darkness, and my advantage was gone. "Now we're even," Viper said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. For maybe 30 seconds, nobody moved. We were all listening, trying to locate each other by sound. Then I heard the soft scrape of a shoe on concrete, somewhere to my left. I held my breath, straining to hear. Another scrape, closer this time. Someone was stalking me in the darkness, moving with careful, practiced stealth. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, swinging, my fists connecting with something soft. A grunt of pain, then hands were grabbing for me. I fought back desperately, throwing punches in the dark, trying to break free. Then something hard cracked against the side of my head, and stars exploded behind my eyes. I went down hard with a metallic taste in my mouth. "Got him," Scarface said. Emergency lighting flickered back on, dying batteries giving one last gasp of power. In the weak, wavering light, I could see all three men standing over me. Viper had his tool out now, pointed at my chest. "Very entertaining, Mr. Norris. But playtime's over." I tried to sit up, but Scarface put his foot on my chest, pinning me to the concrete floor. "You know what I think," Viper continued. "I think you've been planning this little ambush for a while, which means you know more about my business than I thought." "I don't know anything." "Sure you do. Someone told you about the tattoos, about my organization. Someone who shouldn't have been talking." His eyes glittered in the fading light. "Was it Frank Mallory?" I tried to keep my expression neutral, but something must have given me away. "Frank Mallory," Viper said thoughtfully. "Old friend of mine. Did 8 years rather than rat me out. I always wondered if he'd stay loyal after he got out." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Viper knelt down beside me, his tool still trained on my chest. "Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Norris. You're going to tell me everything Frank told you. Then you're going to call him and arrange a meeting. And then we're all going to have a nice long chat about the old days. And if I refuse," Viper smiled, "then I take you out right here, right now. Your wife collects the insurance money, but she has to live with the knowledge that she watched her husband die. Messier than I'd prefer, but it gets the job done." I looked up at the three men standing over me, at the tool pointed at my heart, at the cold calculation in Viper's eyes. Frank had been right. I was just a maintenance engineer, and these were butchers. But I wasn't dead yet, and as long as I was breathing, I still had options. "Okay," I said. "I'll call Frank. Smart man. I knew you'd see reason eventually." What Viper didn't know was that I'd already seen reason. I'd seen it clearly enough to prepare for exactly this situation. The question was whether my preparations would be enough to keep me alive long enough to use them. They let me sit up, but kept the tool trained on me while I made the call. Frank answered on the second ring, his voice tense. "Mr. Norris, you okay? You sound strange." "I'm fine, Frank, but I need to see you, tonight. It's important." There was a long pause. Frank wasn't stupid. He could probably hear the strain in my voice, maybe even guess that I wasn't alone. "Where?" he asked finally. I looked at Viper, who nodded approvingly. "The old Brennan warehouse on Industrial Drive. You know the one?" "Yeah, I know it. When?" "1 hour." "Mr. Norris, 1 hour, Frank. Come alone. I hung up and handed the phone back to Viper. He'll be there. Good. Now we wait. They hauled me upstairs where Carla was pacing the living room like a caged animal. She looked up when we emerged from the basement, her face pale and drawn. Is it done? She asked. Not yet, Viper said. We have one more stop to make. Your husband's been talking to people he shouldn't have been talking to. What people? Frank Mallory. Remember Frank? He used to work for me before he decided prison was preferable to loyalty. Carla's face went even paler. Frank's here? In town? Been collecting garbage in your neighborhood for months, apparently. Keeping an eye on things. Viper's voice was casual, but I could hear the anger underneath. Makes me wonder what else I don't know about my own operation. We drove to the warehouse district in 2 cars, me and Scarface in my truck, Viper and his other associate following in the Escalade. Carla stayed behind, which was probably smart. What was about to happen wasn't something a suburban advertising executive needed to see. The Brennan warehouse had been empty for 3 years, ever since the textile company that owned it moved operations to Mexico. It was a massive brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody heard the screams. Frank's pickup was already there when we arrived, parked in the shadows behind the loading dock. I could see him sitting in the cab smoking a cigarette, looking like a man who knew he was walking into a trap, but had decided to do it anyway. Remember, Viper said as we got out of the vehicles, you called this meeting. You're in charge until I say otherwise. Try to run or warn him, and I'll put bullets in both of you. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. The tool in Scarface's hand was a constant reminder of how quickly this could all go wrong. Frank climbed out of his truck as we approached, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his heel. Up close, he looked older than he had at the gas station, worn down by years of hard living and harder choices. Mr. Norris, he said. Then his eyes found Viper. Hello, Vincent. Frank. Been a long time. Not long enough. Viper smiled. Still holding grudges? I thought 8 years in prison would have taught you some perspective. It taught me plenty. Taught me that some mistakes you live with forever. And some mistakes get you hurt. Viper stepped out of the shadows, his associates flanking him. Like talking to people about things that aren't their business. Frank looked at me, and I saw understanding in his eyes. He knew this was a setup, knew he'd been betrayed. But instead of anger, I saw something that might have been pity. You tried to warn him, didn't you? Viper continued. Told him to run, to get out of town before something bad happened. Very noble, Frank. Very stupid, but noble. The man deserved to know what his wife was planning. His wife's business is my business, which makes it none of your business. Maybe, but I couldn't just watch another innocent man die. Viper laughed. Innocent. Mr. Norris here has been playing detective for weeks, following his wife, asking questions, setting up elaborate traps in his basement. Doesn't sound very innocent to me. Frank's eyes flicked to mine, and I saw a question there. I gave the slightest nod, hoping he'd understand. The trap in the basement hadn't been my only preparation. What do you want, Vincent? Frank asked. Information. You've been watching my operation, keeping tabs on my people. I want to know what you've seen, what you've reported, who else you've been talking to. Nobody, just Mr. Norris. I don't believe you. Viper nodded to Scarface, who stepped forward and backhanded Frank across the face. The older man stumbled, but didn't go down. Try again, Viper said. Nobody else, Frank repeated, wiping the red smear from his split lip. This time, Scarface hit him with the tool handle, opening a gash above his left eye. Frank went to one knee but pushed himself back up. Vincent, he said quietly, you know me. You know I don't break easy. I know the old Frank didn't break easy, but that was 20 years ago. People change. They get soft, they get scared, they start making deals with people they shouldn't be making deals with. What people? FBI, maybe? Local cops. Someone's been asking questions about my business, and it started right around the time you got out of prison. Frank shook his head. I've been clean since I got out. No contact with law enforcement, no deals, no cooperation, just trying to live quiet and stay out of trouble. Then why warn Mr. Norris? What's he to you? Nothing, but I got a daughter his age, and I know what it's like to lose someone you love because of this business. Viper studied Frank for a long moment, then nodded to his associates. Search him. They patted Frank's down roughly, finding nothing but a wallet, keys, and a pack of cigarettes. No wire, no recording device, no evidence of law enforcement cooperation. Clean, Scarface reported. Interesting. Viper walked over to the warehouse wall where someone had spray-painted gang tags and crude graffiti. You know what I think, Frank? I think you're telling the truth. I think you really did just want to help Mr. Norris here. So we're done? Oh, we're done, but not the way you think. Viper pulled out his tool and pointed it at Frank's chest. See, the problem isn't whether you've been talking to the cops. The problem is that you know too much about my current operation, and knowledge like that is dangerous. Vincent, please, nothing personal, Frank. Just business. I saw Viper's finger tighten on the trigger and knew I had to act. My hand went to my pocket, where I'd hidden the remote control for the warehouse's loading dock system. Every municipal building in the city used the same basic electrical setup, and I'd spent enough time servicing them to know how they worked. I pressed the button. The loading dock doors began to rise with a grinding mechanical roar, floodlights blazing to life as the motion sensors detected activity. In the sudden glare, I could see vehicles moving in the darkness beyond the fence. Police cars, FBI sedans, a SWAT van. What the heck? Viper spun around, tool swinging toward me. I called them, I said. Before we left the house, anonymous tip about a pills deal going down. It was a lie, but a convincing one. What I'd actually done was much simpler. The loading dock system was connected to a silent alarm that notified building security whenever the doors were opened after hours. Building security called the cops, standard procedure for empty warehouses in high-crime areas. But Viper didn't know that. All he knew was that we were surrounded by law enforcement, and someone had betrayed him. You son of a witch, he snarled, swinging the tool back toward me. Frank tackled him before he could fire. The two men went down in a tangle of arms and legs, fighting for control of the tool. Viper was younger and in better shape, but Frank had the desperate strength of a man with nothing left to lose. Scarface spun toward me, raising his tool, but I was already moving. 20 years of maintaining industrial equipment had taught me to move fast when things went wrong. I dove behind a concrete loading barrier as bullets sparked off the pavement where I'd been standing. More loud blasts erupted as the FBI moved in, their tactical lights cutting through the darkness like white-hot spears. Someone was shouting orders through a bullhorn, demanding surrender. I stayed behind the barrier, listening to the chaos unfold around me. More loud blasts, screaming, the sound of vehicles racing across gravel. Then, gradually, silence. Clear! Someone shouted. All clear! I raised my hands and stood up slowly. FBI agents in tactical gear were spread throughout the loading area, tools drawn, searching for threats. Frank was sitting against the warehouse wall, holding a rag-stained red to his forehead, but alive. Viper and his associates were face down on the pavement, hands zip-tied behind their backs. A woman in a FBI windbreaker approached me, holstering her sidearm. Mr. Norris, I'm Special Agent Martinez. Are you injured? I'm okay. How did you... Anonymous tip about suspicious activity. When we got here and saw armed men, we called for backup. She looked around at the scene. Lucky timing. Yeah, lucky. Agent Martinez studied my face, and I could see her trying to piece together what had really happened. But the story held together well enough. Wrong place, wrong time, innocent bystander caught up in criminal activity. We'll need a full statement, she said. But that can wait until tomorrow. Right now, let's get you checked out by the paramedics. As they loaded Frank into an ambulance. His injuries weren't serious, but he needed stitches. He caught my arm. Smart thinking with the loading dock, he said quietly. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't? He smiled through the red on his face. Your wife's going to be real surprised when she finds out her boyfriend got arrested. Yeah, I imagine she will be. But as I watched the FBI cars drive away with Viper and his associates, I realized the night wasn't over yet. Carla was still at home, still waiting for news about whether her husband was dead or alive. Time to go give her an update. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway at 2:30 in the morning. Carla's BMW was still there, but every light was off. Either she was asleep, or she was sitting in the darkness waiting for news about whether she was a widow yet. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, trying to decide how to handle this. The smart play would be to call the FBI, tell them about Carla's involvement in the insurance fraud scheme, let them arrest her and sort out the details later. Clean, simple, legal. But after 15 years of marriage, she deserved to hear it from me first. I used my key to open the front door, moving quietly through the darkened house. The living room was empty, but I could see a faint glow coming from the kitchen. I found Carla sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and her laptop, still dressed in the same clothes she'd worn that evening. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw a complex mix of emotions cross her face. Relief, guilt, fear, and something that might have been disappointment. "You're alive," she said, surprised. Vincent said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer. How thoughtful of him." She closed the laptop and pushed it aside. "What happened? Where is he?" "FBI custody, along with his 2 associates." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. Turns out the warehouse was under surveillance. Wrong place, wrong time. Surveillance? Pills task force, apparently. They've been watching the building for weeks, waiting for someone to use it for a deal. When we showed up with tools, they moved in. It was mostly true, close enough to the official story that it would hold up if she checked. What I didn't mention was my role in triggering the silent alarm. And Frank? Hospital. He'll be fine. Carla stared into her coffee cup, her shoulders sagging. So it's over. The immediate threat, yeah, but we still have some things to discuss. Like what? Like the $200,000 you owe, like the life insurance policy, like the fact that you were planning to have me eliminated? She flinched as if I'd hit her. "Greg, I never wanted..." "Wanted what? Me dead? Because that's sure what it looked like from where I was sitting. I was trapped. Vincent said if I didn't pay him back, he'd end both of us. The insurance money was the only way out. So, you decided to throw me under the bus. I hoped maybe you'd just disappear. Leave town, start over somewhere else. Then I could tell Vincent you were dead, collect the money, and everyone would be happy." I stared at her across the kitchen table. This woman I'd been married to for 15 years, and realized I didn't know her at all. "You really thought I'd just run away and let you collect $500,000? I thought you'd want to live. I do want to live, but not as a fugitive hiding from my own life." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Greg. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" "I don't know. I was gambling, losing money I didn't have, and Vincent offered to help. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was in too deep to get out." "When did it start? The affair? 6 months ago? Right after I met him? And the gambling?" "Before that. A year, maybe more. Online poker, sports betting. I was good at it at first. Then I started losing, and I kept thinking I could win it back." The classic gambler's fallacy. Double down on a losing bet, chase good money with bad, dig the hole deeper with every hand. How much do you really owe him? 200,000? Maybe a little more with interest? And now that he's in FBI custody? I don't know. His organization doesn't just disappear because he got arrested. Someone else will take over, and they'll want their money. She was right about that. Organized crime was like a Hydra cutoff, one head and 2 more took its place. Viper's arrest might buy us some time, but it wouldn't make the debt disappear. "What about your job?" "What about it?" "Vincent was consulting for your agency, right? How's that going to look when the FBI starts investigating his business connections?" Her face went pale. "Oh, God. I never thought about that." "You're going to lose your job, Carla. Probably face criminal charges as an accessory. Your life as you know it is over." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice. You can wait for the FBI to figure out your connection to Vincent and arrest you, or you can come clean, cooperate with their investigation, and maybe work out a deal. And if I cooperate, witness protection maybe, new identity, new life far away from here. What about you?" I finished my coffee and set the cup down carefully. "What about me? Would you come with me?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. 15 years of marriage reduced to this moment, this choice. I looked at her tear-stained face, at the woman who'd been planning my death 12 hours earlier, and tried to find some trace of the person I'd fallen in love with. "No," I said finally. "I don't think I would." She nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I'm not sure I do. I don't understand how we got here, how you could look at me every day knowing what you were planning. I don't understand how 15 years of marriage could mean so little to you. It meant everything to me. That's why I couldn't face losing it. So you decided to lose me instead. I hoped there was another way." "There was. You could have told me the truth. We could have worked something out, sold the house, liquidated everything, declared bankruptcy if we had to. But you chose Vincent instead. I was scared. So was I, but I didn't try to have you hurt." She had no answer for that. We sat in silence for a while. listening to the kitchen clock tick away the minutes. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to show in the eastern sky. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you pack a bag and disappear. Tonight, before Vincent's people figure out what happened and come looking for answers." "Where will I go?" "I don't know, and I don't want to know." "Greg." "No," I stood up. "We're done talking, Carla. We're done with everything. Pack your things and get out of my house." "Your house? My life, my choice." I pulled out my phone. "You've got 1 hour before I call the FBI and tell them everything I know about your involvement with Vincent. After that, you're on your own." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded and went upstairs. I heard her moving around in the bedroom, opening drawers and closets, packing whatever she could carry. 20 minutes later, she came back down with 2 suitcases and her laptop bag. She paused at the kitchen door, looking back at me. "For what it's worth," she said, "I really am sorry." "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. Will you ever be able to forgive me?" I thought about that, about 15 years of marriage, about trust and betrayal, about the difference between love and habit. "Maybe," I said, "someday, but not today." She nodded and walked out of my life. I heard her car start, heard her drive away into the pre-dawn darkness. Then I was alone in the house we'd shared for so long, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage that had died somewhere along the way, without either of us noticing. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat back down at the kitchen table. In a few hours, I'd have to call the FBI, give my statement, answer their questions about Vincent and his organization. I'd have to call my lawyer, start divorce proceedings, figure out how to rebuild my life from the wreckage. But for now, I just sat in the quiet kitchen and watched the sun come up over the suburbs, thinking about garbage men and warnings and the difference between being smart and being wise. Frank had been right about one thing. I should have left the house that first night, should have packed a bag and disappeared until the danger passed. It would have been the smart thing to do. But I'd never been much for running away, and in the end, that had made all the difference. My phone rang at 7 a.m. Agent Martinez. "Mr. Norris, I hope I didn't wake you." I was already up. "Good. We need to talk about last night. There are some inconsistencies in the story that we need to clear up." "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The kind that suggest you knew more about what was happening than you let on. Can you come in this morning?" "Sure. Give me an hour." "Mr. Norris, you might want to bring a lawyer." I hung up and finished my coffee. Outside, a garbage truck was making its rounds, the same route Frank had worked before everything went wrong. A different driver now, someone who didn't know about snakes and daggers and the price of loyalty. I wondered if Frank would go back to prison, if his parole would be revoked because of his involvement in last night's events. Probably. The system didn't make allowances for good intentions or noble gestures, but he'd saved my life, even knowing what it might cost him. That counted for something. I showered, shaved, and put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to job interviews and funerals and other occasions that required looking respectable. Then I drove downtown to the FBI field office, ready to tell them everything I knew about Vincent D'Amato and his organization. Everything except the part about the loading dock remote control. Some secrets were worth keeping,